What can you do to overcome writer's block? Hi there, my name is Brian Collins and welcome to the Become a Writer Today show. Today I want to talk to you about writer's block and how you can fix it. Now I hope you enjoy the content in this video. If you do, hit thumbs up. If you want to get more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, or you can also let me know in the comments section below. Now, years ago, I used to struggle with writer's block. I'd open up my Word document, see the flashing cursor on screen, and I'd feel intimidated. How was I going to hit my target word count for the day? So here are strategies I've learned that can help me overcome writer's block and which can help you too. The first strategy is to skip the introduction. Beginnings are tough. So why start at the beginning? How can you know what you're about to say if you don't know what the piece or the story is about? Instead, I'd recommend you start in the middle of your article or your story, or even at the end. Starting in the middle or the end gives you a point where you can write towards or from. And then you can go back and start the introduction because you already know what you're going to say or what your piece is about. The second tip for beating writer's block is to write about what you know. So if you're writing about a topic that you're unfamiliar with, that means you got to go away and do a lot of research. You got to talk to other people and perhaps travel to the place in question. On the other hand, if you write about an experience that you've already gone through, it'll be much easier to get the ideas out of your head and onto the blank page. And you'll also find it much easier to write the article. That may help you gain momentum to start on a more troubling piece later on. My next strategy for beating writer's block is to use a writing prompt. Now, I love writing prompts. Basically, you take a writing prompt, write it at the top of your writing app of choice, and then write a couple of hundred words using the prompt. Much like a weightlifter at the gym or a runner on the track, it serves as a type of warm-up exercise which can help you get ready for a more productive writing session. If you're interested in getting writing prompts, I have 101 of them which you can get by visiting becomeawritertoday.com. And I also cover writing prompts in my book, the Become a Writer Today series. But you don't need to get a writing prompt from someone else. You can simply create your own. In fact, I like using first lines from great books as a writing prompt. I'll write the first line at the top of the manuscript. Then just simply write my reaction to it, and then I'll delete the first line. And often that's enough to get going. My next tip for beating writer's block builds on writing prompts. It's called free writing. It's a strategy I learned from Natalie Goldberg. Free writing basically involves writing about whatever comes to mind without stopping to edit yourself. Your job while free writing is simply to keep your hand moving. And I guess when Natalie said that, she was talking about using pen and paper. So if you're typing, it's to keep your fingers moving. But basically, you write without censoring yourself. If you hear a dog barking outside, write that down. If you hear something in your apartment or your house, write that down too. Again, the job with free writing is to explore ideas in your subconscious. It's a particularly helpful strategy if you're engaged in a creative writing project and you're feeling blocked and you can't quite achieve what you want to achieve. My next tip for beating writer's block is to create a writing schedule. If you're a writer, you need to protect the most creative parts of your day. For me, that means writing first thing in the morning before I'm tired. This was particularly true when I was working as a copywriter for a software company, because I'd find I would be too tired in the evening to sit down and try and write articles for a website I was trying to launch at the time. So I started getting up an hour or two before work to write in the mornings before work. Not saying you need to do that, but ask yourself, when am I going to face as little distractions as possible so I can focus on my writing, and create a schedule around that, even if it means eliminating some other habits that are taking up your time. My next tip for beating writer's block, take a break. Sometimes when you've been sitting on a computer for too long, it can be difficult to figure out how to fix a troubling part of your manuscript. When I face this problem, I like to go for a run, and sometimes when I get back and sit down in front of the drafts that I'm working on, I'll immediately see a solution. Often getting fresh air and going for a walk is enough to get over writer's block. And that brings me up to my next tip, which is run, swim, walk, exercise. Getting your heart moving, getting your blood moving is a great way to free up fresh creative thinking. Many famous writers and authors liked to walk and exercise. Examples include the contemporary essayist David Sedaris and even Charles Dickens as well, who used to walk 10 or 12 miles a day around the streets of London. Another great tip for beating writer's block, meditate. Writing can be difficult. You got to sit down with your uncomfortable ideas and your stories. Meditation can help you sit with discomfort for longer. You can even turn writing into a type of meditative practice through journaling. My next tip for beating writer's block, pick an argument that's popular online and write a contrarian opinion or disagree with it. Pick another expert or another author and an idea that they have and write your reaction to it. Not saying you necessarily need to start attacking them on Twitter, but sometimes taking apart someone else's idea can help you articulate your own ideas in a different way. My next tip for beating writer's block, pick up a set of these, the Oblique Strategies by the musician Brian Eno. Essentially, and Peter Smith, essentially they are a set of creative prompts which you can use for your work. Now, Brian Eno used these to get into a state of creative flow in studio, but they have commandments that you can follow for all types of creative projects. You simply draw from a deck of several hundred cards and go with whatever it says. This one here says, make it more sensual. So if I was using this to beat writer's block, I would go back and look at the piece that I've just written and consider how I could insert one of the 5 senses. There are lots of commandments like these in the deck and they only cost $50. My next tip for beating writer's block, listen to noise cancelling or use a set of noise cancelling headphones to listen to ambient music. I like listening to ambient music like the sound of rainfall because it's got no distracting lyrics and it helps me get into flow state faster. It's particularly helpful if you're in a distracting or noisy environment, or you're sharing your writing space with other people, or you're down in a coffee shop or a library. I'd also recommend that you optimize your environment wherever you write. I'm lucky enough to write in a home office like this. I realize not everyone is, but ask yourself, what distractions can you remove? Years ago, I removed the games console for where I like to write and work. Even if you're sharing your writing space with other people, is there a particular part of the space that you can protect and call your own for certain parts of the day? Or perhaps could you go to a local coffee shop where you create a ritual of writing at a particular table in the coffee shop, or you go to a library or a park? I also recommend writing lists. Sometimes if you write a list of all the things you want to say in the article or story, it's much easier to go away and say them. If you make a list of all the things you need to do around your writing or creative business, it'll get them out of your head and free you up to work on your first draft. Every good writer needs a research system. You don't need anything fancy. You don't need to learn how to use complicated software. You can simply write down ideas on a series of index cards, store them on your desk and review them when you need them. Now, I like to use the Zettelkasten method for my research system. Essentially, it involves writing down single ideas on index cards and interlinking them. I also use software for my version of the Zettelkasten method, but you don't necessarily need to do that. What is more important is simply having a system that you use for your research and your notes. I'd also recommend journaling regularly. This can also act as a type of research system. I use the journaling app Day One every day to write entries of several hundred words in length. I find this is quite helpful when I need to extract stories for non-fiction essays and so on. Journaling is also helpful because it cultivates a writing habit, and often having a habit of writing is enough to get over writer's block. The next technique I recommend is to use the Pomodoro technique. You can set a timer on your phone, put it on airplane mode, write for 30 minutes until the timer goes off. Take a short break, reset your timer, sit down, repeat for another 30 minutes. Do 4 sessions like this and then call it a day. You've got 4 productive writing sessions out of the day, and often that's enough to make significant progress on your manuscript. The Pomodoro technique also works because 30 minutes is long enough to get something done, but not so long that it feels overwhelming. And in fact, I was talking to Francisco Cirillo, who's the guy who came up with the Pomodoro technique, and he actually said I should try 25 minutes, which is even more manageable. Another technique for beating writer's block, disconnect, turn off the internet, use pen, and paper. The novelist Jonathan Franzen, who's written novels like Freedom, says no author of serious note can get work done while connected to the internet. And apparently he removed the Wi-Fi card from his laptop and superglued the Ethernet port so he can write his novels. That's an extreme example. Probably wouldn't work for me because I run content publishing websites. But ask yourself, can I disconnect when I'm working on my manuscript? And there's software you can use like Freedom app, which can help you disconnect without damaging or destroying your computer. I'd also recommend that you reread pieces of your favorite writing. So sometimes reading something that inspires us, reading something from another author can be enough to spark fresh thinking. And it can also inspire you to go back to the blank page. Often writer's block is a matter of consuming the wrong inputs. Perhaps you're spending too much time on social media, the news, or even on YouTube when you should be consuming, classic books, art, and courses related to whatever you're writing about. So ask yourself, do your inputs match your outputs? 2 tactical tips for beating writer's block. Firstly, identify the strongest parts of the piece in question. Focus on improving that and insert more of those stronger pieces into the article. This kind of stuff is great for self-editing. You can also flip that on its head and ask yourself, what's the weakest part of this piece? And then you can remove it. Now, I like using grammar checking software to do this because it'll flag instances of the passive voice and long monotonous phrases. You don't necessarily need to use grammar checking software, but ask yourself, what are the weakest and strongest parts of this piece while editing, and approach it with a critical eye. And that brings me up to another good tip for writer's block. Sometimes you'll write a couple of hundred words, read it and think that's not very good, and go back and try and rewrite it. And then you get stuck in a circle of writing and rewriting. And that's something I struggled with for a long time. If that's happening to you, what I'd suggest is write now, write in the morning, and edit later, edit in the afternoon. Take advice from Stephen King, who said, write with the door closed, rewrite with the door open. In other words, separate writing and editing because they engage different parts of the brain. So when you're writing, you're being creative and expressive, and when you're editing, you're being critical and analytical. And often, breaking them into two separate activities will be enough to help you beat writer's block. I'd also recommend that you leave yourself subtle cues about what to do the next day. So this is something I've done when I've worked on books. I'll get an index card or a post-it, and I'll write down a commandment on the index card, like write 500 words about writer's block. If I was writing about writer's block, I know it's all very meta, but I would leave it on my desk, and I'll do that the night before. And then when I go to bed, that kind of triggers the subconscious to think about what I'd like to say the next morning. Then when I get up the next morning, make a cup of coffee, sit down at the desk or stand at the desk, I see the index card and I know immediately what I need to do. Often these type of cues are enough to get going. So there you go. Those are some of the tips which will help you beat writer's block. I hope you found these helpful. I've also got a companion article where I expand on more tips, and I expand on the tips in this video. And if you like the content, don't forget to hit thumbs up. And if you want to get more videos about the writing craft, press subscribe.